welcome to Fast Politics, Jacob.
Thank you.
I'm so excited to have you here. And also, I have so many things I want to talk to you about. The last time you were on, I don't know if you remember, but at the end of the interview, I was like, so basically, Bitcoin is just kind of a scam. And you were like, yeah. Since that interview, it's probably about 6 months. I want you to talk about what is happening right now with the American economy and Bitcoin and Bitcoin's other, fake money, synthetic currencies.
Sure. Well, for those who don't know, the crypto industry was the biggest donor by industry in the 2024 election. This is not a very big or economically productive industry, but they have a lot of money to punch way above their weight. And the result of that has been, of course, that they helped elect Trump and a lot of pro-crypto Republicans. And now they're starting to get their way with policy and personnel and across the board. I mean, it's all happened very quickly. We've seen a lot of actions by Trump to basically remove a lot of the guardrails around the financial system and to dismantle all these different task forces and groups within various government agencies that were focusing on either crypto regulation or crime related to cryptocurrency. And simultaneous with this, you've had Trump appear as basically the country's most prominent crypto entrepreneur and who's done things that would be considered illegal under any normal regime or presidency, and is also not only is he the most prominent crypto entrepreneur, but he's really jumped in the deep end with the industry's shadiest characters, a lot of whom have had pardons or are headed towards a pardon or have had SEC investigations against them dropped. And so now where we're headed is that with the Genius Act and some of the other regulation coming down the pike, the whole economy will kind of have to play by crypto's rules or a kind of lack of rules. And what the crypto industry wants from people who are into Bitcoin on down is access to more mainstream financing, to Wall Street, to institutional money, and to be able to kind of create all these complex and definitely synthetic and artificial financial products on top of crypto, which itself arguably has no inherent value. So with that comes a lot of instability, a lot of risk, a lot of volatility. And I think if we have sort of a crypto-driven economic crash, it's because the whole kind of economy will be forced to play by crypto's very dangerous set of rules.
I laugh to keep from crying, but I also laugh because crypto doesn't want to be regulated, just like AI. There are so many parallels in my mind between crypto regulation and AI regulation, right? These are both sort of these lobbies that have sprung up like tobacco and oil, both of which are desperate not to be regulated and are trying to circumvent any regulation, like by adding in that ridiculous that states cannot regulate AI for 10 years, like that ridiculous little thing they put in the Republican BBB. But what I think is so hilarious about all of this is that, in fact, it's Congress. So they're not going to fucking regulate they never regulated Facebook. You're really worried they're going to regulate you? All they do is not regulate. Discuss.
Yeah, I think this has been actually sort of an issue across tech for years now, is that they kind of don't realize how good that they have it. And
Right.
that, I mean, of course, there's going to be lobbying and influence peddling and stuff like that. But this is an industry that even under Biden did quite well. And the failures, so to speak, of some things to take off, like crypto, are kind of their own. And so that's actually one thing that I found puzzling or try to explain about like the radicalization of a lot of tech leaders, or like whenever Marc Andreessen,
Baffling.
yeah, whenever Marc
Baffling.
Andreessen throws a fit, it's like, well, you had it so you are as rich as ever. You own six mansions. Your companies
Right.
are flourishing. Maybe you haven't, created God in a computer with artificial intelligence or whatever else, but you pretty much have all you want. And but they take any sort of criticism or now anything that kind of impedes them in any way, very personally. And I mean, they're pretty soft in that way, I think.
Tech bros are fucking babies. I mean, I think that's the net, right? They were so mad. It's funny because I know one tech bro, they had $10 million at Silicon Valley Bank when it went under. And he was like, started texting me. He's like, you have to talk to Biden about bailing out Silicon Valley Bank. And I was like, first of all, it doesn't work that way with Democrats. It's not like if you write about politics that somehow you have a main line to the president and he does favors for you. Like that's not how any of this is supposed to work. And also, I was like, bail out your fucking bank, so you want to socialize the losses and privatize the gains. Like I feel like there's such a disconnect here with tech bros. I mean, I think it's really important. They're fucking babies, right? These people, Marc Andreessen, he was offended. They were so offended by Lena Khan, by the mere existence of Lena Khan. Lena Khan wasn't even able to do a lot of what she wanted to do, but the idea that there would be any kind of check on capitalism in any way was so offensive. And I wonder if you could sort of talk through. I know we know about Andreessen and his funny shaped head and his love of fascism or of authoritarianism. We know about Elon because he tweeted before he got kicked out of the White House. We know that these people are just pretty excited. But the thing that I've been struck by is like Curtis Yarvin, the one sort of the intellectual ringleader of this group, right? I think that article in the New Yorker really exposed him to be just a complete fraud. So I wonder if you could sort of talk to me about where this crew is now, knowing that they're basically sort of glorified Fox News.
Well, it's interesting because a few years ago, the new right or the neo-reactionaries that Curtis Yarvin represents, they try to present themselves as somehow countercultural, or like the new counterculture was these right-wingers who, believe in eugenics and all these other
Right.
bad things. But
Wild.
now, the people they talk to or some of their friends are in power, and I think that changes things a little bit. And I think they've also made a lot of accommodations to sort of the cult of Trump, or just we've seen this even in the last couple of weeks about people kind of bending over backwards to justify Trump's supposedly anti-war people on the right justifying Trump's attack on Iran. And and Yarvin has also done this thing where sometimes he claims he doesn't have much influence, which I mean, I think it is debatable in some ways. He certainly gets written about a lot, but
Right.
they can only be sort of victims or people on the outside for so long because
Right.
now their peers are in power and doing some of the things that they want to be done, like hollowing out the Ministry of State and concentrating more power in the president. I think sometimes when you hear this stuff coming from someone like Yarvin, who speaks in these kind of goofy comic book villain terms almost, it's hard to take seriously. But then you look at what's actually happening in the presidency or in the White House, and it's hard not to see a connection there.
Absolutely true. And there clearly is a connection there. So Jesse really wants to talk about freedom cities.
Oh, sure.
You need to explain to our listeners, though, not everyone is as read in on freedom cities
Sure.
as Jesse is. I made him explain it to me yesterday. So explain what freedom cities are and
Sure.
where they come from, too. I want where they come from.
And this is probably a good example of kind of right-wing Silicon Valley ideology finding common cause with just sort of MAGA Trumpism and finding something in common. Trump has talked about freedom cities, like creating kind of cities out of whole cloth in parts of the United States or maybe Greenland one day, that are kind of supposed to be low regulation or none, inherently somehow innovative. You're going to have hordes of tech companies go in there to try things or do experiments that they're not allowed to do in normal law-abiding communities. I mean, Trump sort of talks about it, or did talk about during his campaign, as kind of a return to the frontier. And the tech
Right.
industry has been trying to do this in the form of what they generally call charter cities for many years. Peter Thiel famously funded seasteading, and which is sort of these people who are going to live on ships or on these
Are
floating
there,
communities.
have they ever happened?
Well, there's one example of a charter city really that I think deserves attention, and that's one in Honduras on the island of Roatan called Prospera, and it's been pretty well covered in the Times and other places. And basically, what they did was this is a venture capitalist funded charter city that they basically made a deal with, at the time, the right wing Honduran government to take over some land where the basic criminal code would still cover them, but they could kind of do anything they wanted. And they started building a little bit and giving out citizenship to tech entrepreneurs who want to come there to, again, it's a lot of people just avoiding taxes or trying or claiming that they want to do medical experiments, biotech stuff. that can't
Right.
be done in the US. There's not much real activity there, but and then there was
Does
a
anyone live there?
yeah, there are at least I mean, I've gotten varying numbers from a few dozen to a few hundred. They do have a sizable chunk of land and like real estate. They took over an old resort, and there's been a lot of protests from locals, and so the national government of Honduras basically turned over, became more liberal left, and said, we don't like this deal that was made with you guys to own this land. It's a long term lease, like 99 years or something like that,
Right.
and they've now been fighting with them, and the people from Prospera are suing the Honduran government for an enormous number that's greater than the GDP of Honduras. It's something like $50 billion.
So it's going well, is what you're saying.
Right, and that's
Yeah.
the successful one, and I've seen all kinds of presentations and lectures from people who basically wanna escape the strictures of the law. I mean, a popular term on the libertarian right is exit. Peter Thiel has used this many times over the years, and, like, exiting society, exiting the strictures of the law. So, when Trump started I don't claim that Trump understands what he's talking about. When he started talking about something called freedom cities or building new communities from scratch, that is sort of a whistle for or dog whistle for
Right.
tech people who when they hear that they think, okay, no laws, no regulation, we can get land cheap and do what we want. And frankly, also some of the people behind this charter city stuff in right wing tech circles are really excited about taking over Greenland because
Right.
that's they want to start a charter city there. I mean, all this stuff
Why?
strikes me as very untenable. I think it's so they can have an authoritarian dictatorship,
Right.
basically, or be totally in charge. Because it's like what you were talking about a few minutes ago with Andreessen and others. They can't really stand to be bound by others' rules. I
Right.
mean, the entitlement is overwhelming. And they do think that they are elites, both genetic elites and cognitive elites who deserve to rule others.
What I have been so I'm married to a ed tech VC, and we've been married a long, long time. And so for a long time, I thought that venture capitalists, because my father-in-law was a venture capitalist, I always thought they were very smart because they built all this businesses, they built all this wealth, they built, so much of America was not, over the last 50 years was built by, investing in small companies and helping them grow and creating these huge monopolies, which was not probably the point. But anyway, but what I am struck by when you got Elon on Twitter, what was so clear to me was this guy's not so smart. I mean, maybe he's good at building rockets, but his thinking is cooked. And when you and Curtis is the same way. When you get Curtis going, he's just he's John Podhoretz, right? He's not some genius. He's just a person who has a lot of discriminatory ideas about how the world works. So I just don't, I just wonder why they think they're so brilliant. It's just because they're rich.
That's part of it. It's also, I think, because a lot of these guys don't do much reading, and I'm
Right.
not that I expect them to be tearing through books all the time, but they kind of think that they've come to first principles on their own, and
Right.
it's like there's a joke about how every couple of years some VC reinvents the bus by saying like
Right.
there's gonna be an Uber van that stops
Right.
at regular locations. Like there's very little respect sort of for what comes before, whether it's
Right. Right.
businesses, or institutions or ideas. And so they just I think you see that a lot with Musk and others who kind of make up solutions as they go along or propose things, and you're like, well, there's already something that does that, or this institution is supposed to do that, but they just don't seem to get it. That becomes a real problem when the people acting like that or speaking like that are billionaires with a huge amount of power, not just kind of idiots on X.
And who are running the government. And
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Elon is clearly out, right? He is no longer running the federal government. We don't really have the great details, but clearly he has just crossed Trump one too many times. So it seems like I know Big Balls has left the government.
Yeah.
I saw that Wired piece yesterday. I mean, what is that? Who sort of are these people now leaving? What are they leaving with?
Mhm.
And how have they fucked up the federal government?
Yeah, unfortunately, some of that is sort of TBD or a long-term thing
Right.
that we're gonna find out as we go along. But, I think Musk and XAI probably got a tremendous amount of data. These are things I think deserve more reporting and investigation. But when the Doge people showed up at the SEC one day earlier this spring, I got a message from a former SEC employee who said, they're going to get their hands on so much sensitive market data because,
Right.
the government or especially agencies like the SEC has really important and kind of privileged and unique data about how Americans live, about the economy, about, and we're not even talking classified information, but just kind of everything around us, how our society functions, that could be enormously valuable, whether to train an AI system like XAI's Grok,
Hmm.
or to try to trade on, or do something more sinister with. And I think the answer is that we don't really know exactly what they're leaving with, but they probably did leave with a lot of data. And then I think there was a pretty revealing comment, kind of confirming what a lot of us thought, from Joe Lonsdale on X a few days ago, where he's part of kind of the greater Musk orbit. He's a venture capitalist, Peter Thiel
Yeah.
disciple, and he said a lot of our friends are still in Doge and in the government, pretty much paraphrasing here. And this is something he said publicly, like, so, and we can chart this too, some of these people at least. A lot of the appointees who came from A16Z or from Musk crew at Doge are still there. And, we
Right.
have the prominent people like Musk or 19-year-old big balls leaving. But the processes they started, some of the things they put in place, I think are going to be very significant, especially as AI systems start getting rolled out to more parts of government and start replacing more people. And I think it's going to be an ongoing disaster of one form or another.
The thing I'm the most worried about is the AI stuff because I'm just not convinced that anyone has thought this through.
Yeah, I mean, I've long argued, not perhaps not long argued.
Yeah.
I've argued that one of the problems with AI is not that it works, but that it kind of is seen as something that works or works well enough so that, the Fortune 500
Yeah.
CEOs and government officials say, let's put this in everything.
Yeah.
Because it kind of works well enough and it saves on human labor, and it's also trendy and makes them kind of look up to speed. And I think a
Right.
version of that is kind of happening right now in the federal government. I mean, there have been, some very well-meaning Democrats have written letters to Doge and other agencies asking, "What are you doing with AI?" But we don't really know. But we do know that these things don't work as well as Sam Altman and others say they do, or as
Right.
Musk does, and that they're tremendous
But
problems and
that
kind of that we haven't even figured out yet.
but that doesn't worry me
Mhm.
as much as it working really well. If it doesn't work, like, we know what to do when shit doesn't work, right? It might cause a kind of Chernobyl moment, which scary and sucks, but, like, we can pull back from something that terrible. The question is, what happens if it works as well as they say it does?
Right. Well, then I think you see kind of AI become one of the tools or handmaidens of more overt fascism, like,
Yeah,
I mean, we haven't mentioned Palantir, but, the
right,
US government, with Palantir, who's been being given contracts left and right, is assembling kind of unified databases of personal information about Americans that, for reasons legal and practical and to preserve our freedoms, have been
right,
separate for
right.
even through kind of the terrible Bush years. And so I think when you see that kind of authority developing and that kind of empowerment, I mean, that can only lead to some very dark places.
Yeah, that's good. I have wasn't worried enough, so this is good. This was so interesting. I hope you will come back.
Oh, I would love to. Thank you.